Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. And welcome to this Recruiting for AML Power session. I'm Jenny Jonas, a Managing Director in KPMG's Financial Crimes and Analytics practice based out of New York. And in my role at KPMG, I provide a range of services to clients who are looking to enhance their AML and sanctions programs, including those that struggle with this very topic, recruiting top talent into their AML and even more broadly speaking, their financial crimes teams. I'm joined today by two colleagues of mine, Emma Monaghan, who is currently the Deputy Global Head of Financial Crime at BlackRock. In that role, Emma is responsible for setting the strategy related to AML, anti-bribery, corruption, sanctions and fraud. Emma has over 20 years of experience working in consulting and in industry, and in doing so has spent much time recruiting and developing teams. I'm also joined today by Eric Wensler. Eric is Director with KPMG, working in our human capital advisory practice. Eric assists Fortune 500 companies, including several leading financial services organizations, in identifying the competencies and skills for success in key roles, and works with them to improve their candidate evaluation processes. So thank you both for joining me today on this important and very relevant topic.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. So I think, or I don't think I should say, that it come as much of a surprise to the audience when I say that filling AML positions, financial crimes positions, with qualified candidates is a challenge that I see clients experiencing consistently across the board. I think we'll come to hear that Eric also sees that challenge. It's evidenced in AML surveys the world over. It comes up year after year as a theme in surveys. And more specifically speaking, failing to appoint qualified AML officers has been mentioned in several regulatory actions. Last year, KPMG surveyed about 200 or so chief compliance officers to understand the top areas of compliance focus for them. Respondents to that survey overwhelmingly recognized the need to enhance, strengthen, develop their recruiting and hiring processes, and in doing so acknowledge the importance that getting qualified people in the door for those positions is really vital. So as a starting point for our conversation today, I'm keen to hear the panel's thoughts. Maybe first we can start with you, Emma, on what the challenges and pain points have been when you've been trying to find the right talent, and if you can elaborate on ways that you've been trying to solve for those challenges and pain points.
Sure. So there were three challenges in finding the right talent that I wanted to focus on today. So the first is there's high demand and lots of competition for good candidates. And, I think particularly in the US, where we have employment at will, it means that there can be a delay between having somebody resign and then being able to replace them. So having a pipeline is a good way to mitigate the risk of being left without key positions being filled, or having to hire a less than ideal candidate because you need to fill the position quickly. Even in our current environments, there's an active financial crime job market and people are moving around. So building out that pipeline and checking in regularly with potential candidates is good practice. The second challenge I would say is finding candidates who are not only strong SMEs, but also candidates who have people manager experience, strong communication skills, and or strong analytical skills. There's plenty of candidates out there who have some AML experience or other financial crime experience, but do they have other softer skills which are increasingly necessary to add value, make a more positive impact, and to be successful within an organization? Just to give an example, we're seeing that there's more and more need to communicate upwards and deliver clear messages in a concise way, and that's expected at multiple levels, not just at the more senior ones. And there's a lot of people who just haven't had experience in those areas. So I think that's another challenge, finding a kind of well-rounded candidate. And then the third area is having strong interviewers who ask good questions. So most of us do interviews as a small part of our role, but getting the most out of a conversation with a candidate takes preparation and skill. So you could end up passing up a good candidate if you're not asking the right questions. And so, you know, taking the time to either be trained, maybe going to your HR team. If you work in a reasonable sized organization, there's a good chance that your HR department will offer some of that training, or there are plenty of external courses available. But it's worth putting some time into your own skills as an interviewer to get the most out of the interviews that you're giving.
Yeah, I completely agree, Emma. I'm keen to also understand whether you see those same challenges when you're working to hire and recruit offshore subcontractor, even consultant talent in this space. Are those challenges the same, or are there different ones that you face when tackling that?
Yeah, so I think some of those same challenges do exist, but I think there's also some particular challenges for each of those populations. So maybe just quickly taking each one from a subcontractor standpoint. You know, often you're bringing in subcontractors to work on a short-term project where you need to have them hit the ground running and add a lot of value in a limited period of time. So again, having that pipeline, or at least having relationships with recruitment or subcontracting firms, means that they can get to know you and also get to know what you're looking for, which can be helpful if you need to bring people in at short notice. Subcontractors can also be a good source for your full-time pipeline. So, you know, having somebody in for a short period of time, but seeing whether they work well with the team, whether they have delivering good quality work, that helps you to assess whether they might be good for a full-time position if one becomes available. From a consulting standpoint, similar challenges to subcontractors in that you need them to hit the ground running. However, you do know generally that you're getting strong SMEs, particularly if you're working with a reputable consulting firm. An added advantage is that if somebody in the consulting firm is not working out for whatever reason that might be, you can swap people in and out relatively easily from the team. One specific challenge that I do see both with consultants and subcontractors is the knowledge walking out of the door. So if you've got a team of consultants or subcontractors that are basically pretty much making up your whole project, they've got some great knowledge, but if they walk out and you don't have a clear handover plan and clear documentation, then it can leave you with a sort of deficit in knowledge once they leave. So I think that's something to be considered.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Emma, on that last point, because we often have conversations with our clients about how to transfer knowledge, and how that has become increasingly important to them, in particular over the last few years. I'm seeing more clients look to do that and make sure that happens before our teams wrap up and roll off, and even considering a ramp down period as opposed to a cold hard stop, where the entire team, you know, wraps up and walks out the door. So completely agree with you on that point. I also think, you know, from my perspective, I think that our clients have, at least historically, seen the hiring of our talent, the project teams that we bring to the table, has been a bit of a black box. You know, typically they engage us to execute on a task, and we will go away, compile the best team that we have, the people that we think are best suited to help the client work through the challenges that they need us to. Gone are the days where our clients now will accept a team that we put forward. Many of our clients are getting involved and wanting to interview the team before we deploy them, and even look at resumes prior to that. And so they're very much getting more involved in that process and making sure that they're comfortable with the talent we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, definitely.
The demand for skills is increasing, and we've seen this in the banking industry over the past couple of decades, where the banking industry years ago used to have its pick of the analytics specialists, the quants coming out of business schools and such. But now every company is looking for those same people. Supermarkets, pizza delivery chains, everybody's looking for people with strong analytics skills, which is putting a strain on the availability of specialists who can help in the financial crimes area or AML area. So it creates a lot of stresses on recruiting. And I know, Emma, you've spoken in the past of seeing that challenge, and Jenny as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, one of the points I was going to make around offshore resources is, if you're looking for financial crime or AML expertise, the really strong subject matter experts are often to be found in the kind of financial hubs around the world, whether it be London or New York or Hong Kong or Singapore. But I think, to your point about analytics, Eric, there is actually... there's some great resources in some of these offshore locations. And if you don't need somebody to be walking in the door with the financial crime experience, but actually the analytics skills are more important, and you can teach them the financial crime experience once they walk in the door, then there are some great options. So in one of my previous roles, I was setting up statistical teams in various locations. And for example, Warsaw was a great location for statisticians. They have some very good universities, and so they are turning out people who are highly skilled in mathematics and economics and statistics. And so that was a great source of skill for analytics. But actually, some other places that we went to didn't have such strong universities, and that actually became quite a challenge to set up teams in those locations.
Yes, so it's obviously really important to have some forethought there going in to setting up those teams or picking locations where you're going to try and establish those teams. Emma, it seems like I want to pick up on something that Eric mentioned, demand for analytics resources. I think it's a very, very important point to draw out there. That's one of the areas where we continue to see high demand for talent, Eric. So consistent with what you were noting. I think as it relates to financial crimes, I think where we're seeing not a lot of demand for those and need from that for those types of skill sets stemming from is a couple of things. Automation, right? There's a big drive right now and interest in how do you automate largely manual processes to drive cost efficiencies from a process. I think the other thing that we continue to see clients struggling with, or that I continue to see clients struggling with, is this notion of siloed data, inconsistent data, even duplicative data. What I see some of the more proactive organizations that we work with doing is performing data lineage exercises, creating data models, and those activities need analytical resources, data and technology resources. Yeah. So I think that's why they're in highest demand.
Yeah, I'd like to just build on that point, Jenny, because it's beyond analytics. There's other skills, and I think one thing that happens in recruiting that creates challenges is we just look for a certain label. We might look for AML, or we might look for a CAM certification or something. But if we can recognize those underlying skills that are needed for the job, that will give us an advantage in identifying and in selection as well. So beyond analytics, we might look for pattern recognition skills, and those skills might be in pattern recognition in data, and also in behavior. Some of our forensic work is around behavior. There's also research work. There's knowledge of the laws. There's a lot of information in the skills profile for the jobs that we seek, that if our recruiting teams look underneath, they'll start to find those people and be able to build a talent pool that can help us with recruiting. Yeah,
agreed. Emma, beyond the analytics skill set, what are some of the other skill sets and experience that you're seeing being in high demand?
So, I walk, as you sort of introduced me, Jenny, I work across financial crimes broadly. So a couple of areas that we're really seeing a lot of demand and where we're seeing regulatory focus and new guidance having come out recently, or sort of enhanced guidance, is both in the anti-bribery and corruption space and sanctions. Sanctions right now is a very hot area. The present administration in the US has used sanctions significantly as a deterrent, and there's no reason to think that the next administration will change much from that approach. And in the sanction space, there's zero tolerance by the regulators for errors. There's interpreting sanctions can be pretty complex, and you often need to take action very quickly. So having people who preferably worked within the government in the sanction space and also have a legal background is something that we definitely look for. And then one other area I would say is language skills. So, in addition to being a strong SME, particularly if your team is going to be working on the ground with the business, whose first language is often not English, then actually bringing people in who've got those language skills can be very important and make a big difference.
Yeah, I think also to add to that, Emma and Eric, there are two really big areas of demand we're seeing on our own staff and our own financial crimes team. People with skill sets in both AML and internal audit, or audit in general, really. That's a big area for us right now, and where we're seeing a lot of demand. I think that's largely in response to the fact that historically AML skill sets have not traditionally sat within the internal audit team. I think many clients now are focusing on making sure that these skill sets, they are there. So when they perform AML audits, they can pick up issues and conduct them effectively. So I think that's one area. I think the other area where we're seeing a lot of demand and interest is when our clients are experiencing backlogs, when they're experiencing fluctuations in operational volumes, like transaction monitoring alerts, periodic reviews, for instance. Many of our clients are reaching out to us and other similar organizations to use outsourcing services. It allows them to get back in the driving seat and get back on top of volumes in a really cost-effective and efficient manner. And so that's two other areas that we're seeing some big demand and interest for skills. And in a previous role that I was in, that we actually put the internal audit team through ACAMS training to make sure that they got that background, and I think that worked really well. So I completely agree on that.
That's an excellent idea. Yeah, the early prep for those teams.
Yeah. I'm keen to pivot some of the conversation now, although I know we've sprinkled it into the dialogue so far, into some of the best practices that the audience can implement to improve their recruitment processes, to improve their retention rates and develop their talent. I know we'll all have collective and many different thoughts on that, but maybe Eric, I can start with you, and maybe we can just focus for a minute on the hiring process.
Sure, certainly.
That for me personally has yielded mixed success over the years. Do you have thoughts on some of the best practices in that space?
Yeah, and it's the practice that's been adopted by many leading organizations, which is really important, is developing a talent pool for people in a specific job family. So we're not just doing just-in-time recruiting, but we have a resource that has not just a few, but has dozens, if not hundreds, of candidates that we might look at as our first source of new folks, new workers coming in. And that talent pool can span from potential employees to potential contractors. We can go across both sides there in a talent pool. So that's important. There may be some items on the HR and talent acquisition team. There are technologies that help with that. There are candidate relationship management tools that can support building talent pools. Some of the larger applicant tracking systems or recruiting systems also do that. Sometimes it's good to get a niche technology to help solve some of this. So that's one key piece that I would make sure you have that in place. Secondly, make sure the recruiting team knows how to look for skills beyond just looking up a certification or AML in the resume. How do they look for the actual underlying skills that will bring success? And I'll pause there because there's a lot more that can be done in recruiting, but those are two key steps to help prep a pipeline for good talent.
And I don't know if you have any thoughts to add there.
Yeah, just a couple. So, I think a good practice is considering giving people stretch roles. So, we're often looking for that ideal candidate. We have job descriptions with lots of skills listed, but actually, and this can apply to both internal and external candidates, although you'll probably have a better sense with internal candidates whether they are capable of stepping up or not. But I think, if they're smart and ambitious, even if they don't have experience in everything you're looking for, it's often worth giving people the opportunity. And I've found that when I have done that, in the majority of cases, they really have stepped up and been successful. So I think that's one sort of best practice. The other one that I would just mention is making sure that the candidate meets multiple people. So not stretching the interview process out so it's really long and painful, but having enough people in the process and varied enough people so that you can get different viewpoints. And that's advantageous from the hiring manager's standpoint, but also I think it's good for the candidate as well, because it gives them a chance to get a sense of whether they fit well within an organization. And we've probably all had the experience that we brought somebody in who we think's a great fit, but actually they end up not being happy because they don't feel, for whatever reason, like they fit into the company once they're there. So it's advantageous to both sides, I think, to have them meet a variety of people as you're going through the hiring practice.
Yes.
Yeah. I think when you do that too, you have to spend time ahead of those interviews, ahead of utilizing those people in that way to coordinate the role of each interviewer and allow them to target some questions that maybe someone else doesn't have time to target. We only have limited time with these candidates and a lot to try and learn about them. So I think having some coordination there, assigning roles and purposes to each interview is a good practice. It's a good practice to follow.
Well, yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, interview training, absolutely. I think that gets neglected. We're at least in the financial crime space, right? We're financial crime specialists, not necessarily interview specialists. And so I think supporting those hiring managers is important, and giving adequate training will only help further or improve the output from these processes. I was reading an interesting article not too long ago. I think it was in the New York Times, and they made some interesting suggestions for how you could, or things you could introduce to the interviewing process to improve your understanding of a candidate and whether they would be a good fit for your organization. A couple of things I want to mention from that article. One of the suggestions was to set homework, but not give a deadline for that. And in doing that, you are really getting a good view into what their work ethic is.
Very true.
And I think the other thing, if I'm recalling correctly, that our article suggested was ask them what they plan to do to be successful in the first 30, 60, 90 days. People who are really engaged and really want to lead and take initiative will probably give a great answer to that question. And again, I think it'll be a good indication as to how they'll start and the type of person that they really are. So I just sort of add those few insights. What about the when you've got someone in the door? You're really happy with your hire. What about retaining and developing them once they're in the door? Maybe Eric, we can start back with you again on that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the trend and leading practice is to open the door for people to create and craft their own career journey. Is for workers to look at where do they want to go in their career, and then how do we create synergy with the organization's goals. So they might, whether they advance in a straight line or they jump around and get different experiences. But candidates who have that opportunity to meet their own needs, what their own goals are, they tend to stick with companies and be more productive. They tend to have a higher level of engagement with their work. So it's not just giving work to someone, but it's really a two-way conversation around what does that candidate aspire to do with their career, and how do we find places in the organization so they can grow their career. So that's one key element apart from learning and development and other opportunities.
Emma, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that, Eric, and I think that's really important. One other thing that I would add is providing clear and timely feedback throughout the year. I think giving developmental feedback is never particularly easy or something that people relish doing, but I actually think you're doing your team a disservice if you don't give them that. I've heard increasingly from HR departments that what you hear in your year-end assessment should not be a surprise. So you should have been hearing that throughout the year. And so giving people an opportunity to pivot their behavior or work on something throughout the year, I think is the way that you really help people to grow. And then just one more point to add is, I think whether you've got an existing team or you're building out a new team, actually thinking big picture about career paths is important, and how people can move through the organization. And I think if you have larger teams such as KYC onboarding or transaction monitoring teams, that might be a more clearly laid out and defined path. But for some of these, say, advisory roles or other areas of financial crime, it may not be as clearly defined. And so you may not be able to say to somebody, you will spend 3 years in this role and then you will get promoted. But sort of back to your point, Eric, I think setting some sort of expectations and giving some sort of path is important to enable people to grow their career.
Yeah. And Emma, you spoke in the past about the pain of the two-week resignation notice in the States. And what you just described tends to avert those 2-week notices, because you have a better relationship with your team, and also a more planned approach as to what their next career move is, so we can then plan our talent pipeline accordingly and not get surprised with openings that pop up because we didn't know that someone was planning to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what underpins a lot of what you both have just been speaking about is training, right? And developing each of these resources, underlying skill sets, knowledge. We see, and I had my own experiences with this, we see our clients, the organizations rolling out great training programs for their people. And sometimes those people, just because of the workload that they have, just don't have the time to dedicate to those, or they dedicate it superficially, so to speak. They're working and they're doing that training, but they're multitasking and not taking learnings from it, such that it's, impeding their development, if you will, and their knowledge growth. One of the best practices we've been seeing recently is the introduction of quarterly training days, where you side mark period of time, be it 4 hours, 8 hours, for each resource to be able to take trainings that they need to complete them with no distractions. And I think that leads to more productive and happier employees, people who know that they're being given that time to grow and develop. I think the other thing on the topic of training is having training that is relevant, that is timely, that is talking to your team about very relevant and hot topics. We've been doing a lot of work in the training space with organizations, helping them to develop or even refresh their AML training programs. Earlier this year, I participated in presenting to a board of directors for one of our clients and presenting them with AML training. I think clients and just organizations in general tend to see the benefit of at least periodically bringing in consultants, third-party contractors to help them refresh, revamp, give a fresh set of eyes to the training programs that they have in place. just for that reason. I think it gives them a fresh perspective and allows them to make more relevant training. So I know we're almost out of time for today. Emma or Eric, are there any parting words from either of you on this topic?
We've just scratched the surface. There's a lot more that can be done in terms of finding good people. So, read up, learn, train, reach out, and, there's always opportunities for improvement. Yeah,
I agree with that sentiment, Eric. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me in this discussion today, and for the audience for tuning in to listen to this panel remotely. I hope that, to Eric's point, we've given you some food for thought and presented some ideas that will help you improve the output from your recruitment processes, retain your top talent. Our contact information is in the slides, so if there is any question, any follow-up that you'd like to do with us, we'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So Emma, Eric, thank you for your time today.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks very much.